The fans, more thrilled to see the fans, actually. They always have a good jungle story. I learn something new when I'm here.
The tale of Jungle Jim and Pamela Hardy, who later grew into Jungle Pam, was that of an unbreakable bond that resulted in something quite spectacular. Riding on Jim's legacy, Pamela was able to make a name for herself in the racing scene, laying the groundwork for the progression of females into racing. During the peak of her career, Pamela left a mark with her iconic dressing style that revealed it all and attracted fans all over the world. Join us as we explore this uncommon tale, starting right from where it all began. Jungle Jim Liberman was one of drag racing's biggest names. Liberman was born in 1945 and was interested in cars as he grew up. He was already well into funny car racing before becoming an adult. He got his Jungle Jim nickname due to his rough-handling style and showman persona. While other drivers were most worried about victory, Liberman understood the show was a part of the business. He cultivated an image that made him one of the most recognizable drivers in the sport. From his hippie hair and tacky style to his affinity for long, flowing burnouts and wild quarter-mile runs. Drag racing during the late 1960s and early 1970s was changing, and Jungle Jim was leading the way. He was a showman, not just a race car driver, and he worked the crowd, making each lap around the track exciting to watch. As a high-strung driver with the front of the car usually in the air, as he tore around the track, each lap was always more breathtaking than the last. His talent on the track and his natural charisma had gained him a loyal following. Jungle Jim's life in 1972 took another turn when he met a young woman named Pamela Hardy. Pam was only 18 years old and did not have any experience with drag racing. Liberman saw something in her that he believed could add to the Jungle Jim mystique. With her appearance and undeniable charm, she was the missing ingredient in his act. Liberman trained her, and she soon became Jungle Pam. Pam's presence on Jungle Jim's crew was a game-changer. She was not just a crew member, she was part of the act. She'd wear tight uniforms and boots, usher Liberman into the burnout box, inspect his car, and help with maintenance between runs. Behind her flamboyant facade, she was a member of the team, learning about funny car engine internal mechanics, and helping with chores that kept the cars running at peak performance. She wasted no time in showing she was more than a pretty face. They had a spirited relationship, and fans adored the chemistry between them. Pam added a new bit of drama to Jungle Jim's already flamboyant stage shows, and their team was one of the largest crowd attractions on the drag racing circuit. They lived off the strip as much as they were a part of it. They were two peas in a pod. The on- and off-track chemistry they shared was real, and they were one of the sport's most recognizable couples in an instant. Jungle Jim's popularity only grew throughout the 1970s, and his driving style just became more and more wild. He maintained a hectic pace, performing a dozen shows a week or more, traveling from coast to coast in pursuit of thrills and victories. Any other driver would simply hope to win championships. But Jungle Jim was most concerned with his fans. He knew it was just as important to satisfy them as it was to bring trophies to the doorstep. This made him a sweetheart, but also put an unbelievable level of pressure on him and his team. Despite the demands of their lifestyles, Jungle Jim and Jungle Pam remained forces to be reckoned with. Pam and Jim built a name together and were easily recognizable faces in the racing scenes. However, they did face some of their own challenges. They had to deal with the ruthless drag racing circuit and all the challenges that came with it. By the late 1970s, Jungle Pam and Jungle Jim faced a fatal trial that finally separated them. Jungle Jim's sudden and accidental death on September 9, 1977, was the final nail in the coffin for Jim and Pam. Unlike the fireball crashes that most frequently took drivers' lives, his demise occurred off the drag strip. He was traveling in his Chevrolet Corvette in West Goshen Township, Pennsylvania, when he tried to overtake another vehicle at high speed. He lost traction and crashed head-on into a bus, and the crash killed him instantly. He was only 31 years old. Jungle Jim's death shocked the racing world. His death was a surprise to the other fans and drivers, and they all could feel the loss of a man who contributed so much life and energy to the sport. An era was lost, as there would never again be another showman like him. Jungle Pam, who was still very close to Jim, was extremely distraught over it. She had been such a part of his success, and his death had been such a reminder of the dangers which had always come with their way of life in the world of speed. In the years that followed Jungle Jim's death, he grew more popular. He was remembered for his feats in drag racing posthumously. His name was still linked with the golden age of funny car racing. Jungle Pam was also a drag racing legend, attending races regularly and telling stories of her time with Jungle Jim. She embraced her role in the history of drag racing, ensuring their story would never be lost. Although their love was relatively short-lived, the impact that Jungle Jim and Jungle Pam had on drag racing was incalculable. They formed a bond that went beyond that of a driver and crew chief. They were a show, a spectacle, and a part of motorsport legend. Jungle Jim's aggressive on-track behavior and Jungle Pam's personality combined into something quite spectacular. Their careers defined an era, and even decades after Jungle Jim's tragic death, their legend continues to captivate racing fans around the globe. Jungle Pam Hardy didn't just join the world of drag racing, she revolutionized it. When she was first brought into the spotlight as Jungle Jim Liberman's stunning partner, she brought a touch of glamour and panache never before linked with the sport. But her journey wasn't riding shotgun with Jungle Jim. She would eventually leave her own impression, one that would be a brand name and a legacy that would continue much after she was gone from racing. Pam's appearance wasn't just about how beautiful she was, it was about commanding respect. She possessed an electric personality that made her impossible to ignore, and a coolness that allowed her to be the focus of attention in a man's game. Most of the women who competed then were behind-the-scenes helpers or spectators. Pam was in front, commanding attention as she prowled the pits, drove Jim's car, and performed her tasks. She had a kind of natural aura, and that irrepressible stage presence set her on a path to popularity. What was probably most legendary about Jungle Pam were her outfits. She didn't dress just for utility but also to dazzle. While most of the crew wore street clothes, Pam brought her game to a whole different level by wearing clothes that accentuated her shape, hugged her curves, and made sure everything was centered around her. She wore tight-fitting clothes, often walking around in halter necks, mini shorts, and low-cut tops that accentuated her amazing outline. Her go-go boots were one of her trademarks, which complemented the trademark look. Each part of her appearance was given a lot of thought in the hope of making an everlasting impression. Her dress wasn't just nice, it was a statement piece. It represented the new direction that the sport was taking by signaling that it was possible for women to become an integral aspect of drag racing outside of the general stereotype. She broke that stereotype, and it showed how femininity fits with motorsports. While her looks undoubtedly commanded attention, it was the way she dressed with that kind of casual boldness that made her absolutely unforgettable. She exuded a calm coolness, showing that her presence has to be respected. What made Pam all the more amazing was that she was not a sideline sideshow. Although much emphasis was placed on her looks, she did know a thing or two about the sport. It did not take her long to figure out the funny car operation and other things about the sport. She was not out there for just the fanfare, she was actually a Jungle Jim team member. Her popularity was limitless, and before long she was getting as much attention as Jungle Jim. People queued in their hundreds to see her doing her job with as much flair and elegance as had originally propelled her into the spotlight. Photographers queued up to photograph her on the go, and Pam's face graced magazine covers. Her fame ventured out onto the drag strip and was making an inroad into racing magazines, calendars, and brochures. She was now a name in her own right, a person no longer merely known as Jungle Jim's woman. Pam stood now as a representative of something with a bigger purpose. She was a new kind of presence in the sport and was a woman who could be feminine but yet fit in as part of the racing fraternity. She was not to be ignored, and other women in the motorsport world were paying attention. She showed that there was space for women to be more than background players on the fringes of drag racing. They can also be in the spotlight, as she was. Even after Jungle Jim died unexpectedly in 1977 in an accident, Pam's popularity was unstained. She retired from working at the Strip after Jim's death but never severed links with the racing drivers. She was forever regarded as a legend, and to be honest, used to appear at classic car racing get-togethers and fan meetings. She still remained mentioned among the golden generation legends of drag racing. Pam wasn't merely a crew member, she was a performer, personality, and legend. She opened doors to enable women in motorsports to have a presence and a place of respect in the sport. With her daring fashion, confident demeanor, and vast racing knowledge, she showed everyone that she was more than Jungle Jim's sidekick. She was Jungle Pam, a name that would be etched in drag racing history forever. Her legacy can still be sensed years later. Her pictures of her legendary appearances are still being shared among racing fans, and her contribution to the sport is something that is still argued. She changed perspectives about how the public viewed witnessing women participate in drag racing, exposing them to being glamorous and radiant, sexy and alive. She earned a reputation on substance rather than just style, and for this, she remains a modern-day icon. Jungle Pam's story is one of drive, of moving into a man's domain and claiming it. She didn't just stand alongside Jungle Jim, she stood apart, making her own name. Her beauty, her grace, and her enduring persona ensured she was more than a footnote in motorsport history. Jungle Pam Hardy's introduction to the world of racing was one of a kind, and indeed a revolution. When drag racing was a man's world, she became an inevitability as she broke down stereotypes and opened doors for other women who wanted to leave their mark in the sport. Though her beginning was as a supporting feature to Jungle Jim Liberman, she quickly became a star in her own right, proving that women did have a place in motorsports besides background girls or spectators. She insisted on being heard, not just due to her appearance, but also due to the assertive and forceful way that she presented herself. She was deeply engaged in the competition process, learning about the inner mechanisms of the vehicles and being an active participant in their care. She wasn't simply there to be watched, she understood the equipment, the strategy, and the thrill of the activity. This level of engagement was rare for women who participated in drag racing at that time, but Pam demonstrated very clearly that she was far more than adequate to the challenge. As her popularity increased, she opened the eyes of other women to the fact that motorsports was a place where they did belong. Young girls and prospective female mechanics viewed her as an individual who broke the mold. Pam showed that women had room to be more than sideline spectators or product endorsers, as they could be part of the racing community. As drivers, mechanics, or crew, women had a place in the sport, and Pam shed light on that. Her impact extended beyond motivation. Before Pam, there wasn't much feminine involvement in the sport, and even if the women were invited in, they were basically just accessories to the drivers. Rolling up her sleeves to work on staging and being a crew member, she redefined what could be achieved by a female. She wasn't there to stand by Jungle Jim, she was part of the team. The media assisted in spreading her influence. As photographs of her work were shared via racing publications and newspapers, more women became attracted to the sport. They could see that one could enter the world of motorsports and be taken seriously. Pam's presence normalized women's participation in racing so that generations of women could step into the sport without having to contend with as much doubt as she initially faced. The 1970s were revolutionary times for motorsport, and Pam was in the middle of it all. Her time on the track opened up the way to the next wave of female crew members and women racers. Drivers like Shirley Muldowney, easily the most accomplished female drag racers in history, were in a position to take advantage of the shift in attitude that Pam helped to start. However, despite her enduring legacy, Pam's sporting career was cut short in the end. With the death of Jungle Jim in 1977, an era had passed, not just for his fans, but for Pam as well. The two had been partners, as well as partners in every way. and their chemistry had been a significant portion of what had made their act. Pam couldn't get around with working with any other racer, out of respect for Jim. Without Jim, racing wasn't the same to her. She wasn't able to locate the same niche for herself in the world of racing in the days after his death. Jim was not just a race car driver, he was an entertainer, a showman, and a man with a certain presence at the track no other human could provide. They had a unique relationship, and trying to replicate that chemistry with another driver didn't seem to be possible. It was hard for her to compete with the other players, not because she lacked talent or determination, but due to a lack of chemistry, which had existed between Jim and herself. Although propositions were set down before her, she did not seem to want any of it. She built her place in drag racing with Jim, and without him, it lacked the same flair. She would rather retire and leave the world that had seen her shine so bright. She lost the flame, but the fame stayed with her. Her reputation was maintained despite her decision to retire. Though she didn't play as actively on the tracks anymore, her name had already been established. The women who followed her footsteps further developed the progress she had gained. Women crew members and mechanics were becoming more common, and the idea of women in motorsports became popular. Since she has been away from drag racing, Pam has remained close to the sport in a different way. She was a fossil from the good old days, a reminder of the times that funny car racing was at its peak. Although fans no longer looked up to her as such, she made appearances here and there at races, entertaining followers with tales about her life as Jungle Jim's partner and maintaining the legacy of their relationship. Her story is a testament to the manner in which one person can change the direction of an entire industry. By breaking into a profession where women had not frequently ventured, Pam set the path for those who followed her. She did not set out to be a pioneer, though. She merely took the job she was given and made it her own. But in so doing, she broke the mold and forever made her mark upon the pages of drag racing history. Even when she eventually retired from the sport, her effect never did. The world of racing that she contributed to only went on to flourish, and women's racing and motorsports only became increasingly mainstream as the years passed. She had shown that women no longer had to be observers, and that women could compete in the sport, equally as well as men. Jungle Pam's pro career was perhaps started on a whim, but it grew into something greater than that. She was a trendsetter, a pioneer, and a legend. Her career as a drag racer was brief, but the impact that she left on the sport still continues to this day. And though she could not envision continuing on without Jungle Jim, her own legacy endures for those who wish to make their imprint in the motorsports world, just as she did so many years ago. Are there some other facts that you know about Jungle Pam? Let us know in the comments and make sure to check out our other videos.